Hello Rayclass, Zambash here. Welcome to my build guide for the Reave of Refraction Gladiator that I started off the Settlers of Kalgor League with. As a little disclaimer here at the beginning, like most of my guides, this isn't really intended to be an extremely detailed hand-holding kind of guide, so I wouldn't recommend this for newer players. And that's mostly because I really wouldn't recommend most of the builds I play for brand new players, so I don't think there's really much point in doing a super hand-holdy kind of guide because these builds are largely aimed at more experienced players anyway, and largely to serve as inspiration rather than something for you to follow to the letter. As usual, you can find a path of building in the video description. I have reasonable things checked in the configurations tab to give you a decent idea of what the build will actually play like, and you will not find a detailed notes section with lots of extra information because, as mentioned, this is more of a showcase slash inspiration rather than a highly detailed hand-holdy build guide. So, for pros of the build, it's got very fast clear. For a melee character anyways, you hit pretty much the whole screen with your Reave and you attack really fast and your shield charge around really fast. It's a very durable build. You've got a lot of defensive layers and are really tanky in most situations. It's a super well-rounded build. You can do pretty much any content. I've done T17s, I've done Ubers, I've done regular map blasting. I'm sure you could very comfortably delve around 600 based on past experience, although I chose not to do any delving this league. Basically anything you want to do, you can probably do fine on this build. Cons, it was definitely a poor league starter. It requires quite a lot of investment before it gets to the point where it feels very good. I was definitely struggling pretty hard for the first several days, so definitely wouldn't recommend this as a league starter unless you are someone who doesn't mind that struggle. I kind of like the process of really slowly upgrading, but if you're somebody who wants to be strong right off the bat, definitely don't league start with something like this. It needs a decent level of investment before it's really going to be solid. It has pretty limited single target damage scaling. We're not really abusing any of the kind of traditional overpowered mechanics. We don't have any projectile shotgunning. We don't have any war cries or anything since we're not a slammer build. We don't have any multi-hitting like you'd get with something like Lightning Strike or Smite. You're pretty much just a straight attacking character, nothing fancy, so there's not really a way to scale your damage to infinity other than going to like mirror tier gear in every slot. So you're just going to have to settle for probably kind of okay single target damage. In the configuration I've got set in the POB against pinnacle bosses, we're sitting around 10 million DPS with reasonable things checked. So nothing crazy, but enough to get the job done and everything. And you are susceptible to damage over time on this build. Not so much elemental damage over time with the setup I've gone, but we don't have any real way to mitigate chaos damage over time significantly, so you can definitely struggle with that. So, with the intro out of the way, pros and cons out of the way, I'm just going to let some more footage play in the background here, a little more of this map blasting, and I'll show a little bit of a T17 map and a T17 boss, and then we'll just go in-game in the hideout, and I will talk through everything that you need to know about the character.
You shall be remade! Let me beautify you!
welcome back. Welcome to the hideout. I think I will start by going through the passive tree on the character. We are a gladiator. We go for the block nodes, of course, to get lucky block. That gives us a effective 88-88 spell block and attack block with our versatile combatant. We go for Weapon Master. I think the dagger node there, 20% more critical strike chance, is probably the single best mod on that wheel, or on that node. Of course, you would rather be leveraging multiple of them by dual wielding different weapon types or whatever, but if you're just going to be using one, I think the dagger one is the best. And then we don't have anything to do with retaliation skills or with bleed stuff, so we go with War of Attrition. I definitely agree with most people that it is on the weaker end of ascendancy nodes in the game, but it's still extra free damage, and especially on fights that have lots of long invulnerability phases, which a lot of the big bosses do, this still stacks up the entire time that they're in their invulnerability phases, so you just do more and more damage as the fight goes on. We are focusing heavily on going up the right side of the tree because of course we're using a dagger for Reave, and all of the dagger stuff is on the right side. I will start by talking about frenzy charges. You definitely want to grab all 3 frenzy charges and get extra ones where you can, like Darkray vectors, because one of the big offensive, well, mostly defensive layers, but ties in with the frenzies for offense on this character, is that we're using Forbidden Flesh and Flame to get Masterful Form, which gives us an extra frenzy charge and makes it so we have an equal number of max endurance charges to our max frenzy charges. So I'm currently sitting at 8 max frenzy and endurance charges. I've been camping trade all league looking for a Peripeteia that has life on block plus a frenzy charge implicit. Only one has showed up, and unfortunately the person was online and it was sold by the time that we were both online. That would be ideal to get a 9th frenzy and endurance charge. Since we're going for all those charge things, we are grabbing both the frenzy and endurance charge wheels here, and I found that the charge duration makes it a lot more comfortable to play, makes it so you only need to do an enduring cry once every 20 seconds on a boss to keep your endurance charges up. Obviously, Disciple of the Unyielding keeps them up while you're mapping. Frenzy charges, again, we don't have a ton of frenzy charge generation on bosses, we've just got the 10% on our chest, so having that extra duration makes things comfy, and same goes for our power charges, which we are only generating through Assassin's Mark. Obviously, you do have a lot of charges, so that 3% increased damage per charge is pretty tempting, but I found the charge duration to be far more comfortable. To cap out our block, it takes relatively little investment thanks to the Gladiator giving us a base of 50 block regardless of what shield we're using. So we grab this half of the block wheel here, and we grab this little block wheel here with the +1 chance to block spell damage per 5% chance to block attack damage. That's really all the investment in block that we have, of course along with Versatile Combatant, and that gets us to our block cap. We take the other damage things around the shield side of the tree. We got life along the way, of course. We do have blind as a defensive layer. I'll quickly rattle off all of the defensive layers. We've got the capped block, we've got life gain on block, we've got a really high evasion rating along with blind that multiplies that further. We've got Ghost Dance with a decent little energy shield pool that gets refilled if anything actually gets through our other layers. We've got Elusive, we've got Capped Spell Suppression, we've got Fortify thanks to the Dagger Enchant from Settlers of Kalgur, we've got the many endurance charges, we've got some Leech plus the instant Leech Mastery, and most of the things we're fighting are frozen all the time because we do a large amount of cold damage. So lots of defensive layers, pretty hard to die on this build unless you stand in some nasty damage over time. So we grab this blind wheel, that helps us get to our crit, along with that 20% more critical strike chance on daggers from the Gladiator, and I've stacked quite a lot of base crit. I've got a really good dagger, which we'll talk about. I've got almost 2 base crit on the chest. You get another 1 base crit from Elusive, or rather from the Nightblade support that gives Elusive, and then you've got Assassin's Mark, so it takes us relatively little investment to get to capped crit chance as well. We get the little blind crit there, get some generic crit there, we get the dagger crit wheel here, and we have like inspiration support and power charges, and just that is enough to get us the capped crit without a diamond flask. So again, very little investment there, which leaves us more room for other things. We use a cluster jewel setup here to fit in that Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame for Masterful Form. That's just the easiest way to access a couple more jewel slots, and I recommend Martial Prowess. And I guess that you do actually need this little bit of extra block chance here to get your blocks capped out as well, so you're going to want to go for one of the blocking cluster jewel notables. Life on the way, life on the way. We grab this Thrill of Battle to reduce the mana cost on our attack, and it gives us access to that 12% reservation efficiency, which we grab on top of this little reservation wheel. Lets us fit in the things that I wanted to, and I'm not even using an Enlighten. We take Inveterate. For the spell suppression, of course, we've got the 15 suppression mastery there, and then we've got suppression on dark ray vectors as an implicit. I've got suppression on my hat, I've got suppression implicit on my gloves, and then I'm using a Watcher's Eye with grace suppression as well. That gets us to spell suppression, with Inveterate being the only real investment in suppression on the tree. We grab this nice elusive dagger wheel along with the elusive mastery for some more crit multi. This right here is where we get our leech as well as some instant leech. More life here, our Watcher's Eye, Frenzy Charge, and the half of the dagger wheel that gives crit, along with critical strikes have Culling Strike on the dagger mastery. Throw in a Lethal Pride here. You're definitely going to run into strength issues if you don't use a Lethal Pride, and Lethal Pride is just a really strong jewel as always for attack builds. I got a pretty decent one that actually has 6 useful things on all 6 of the nodes. I've got 15 melee crit multi, I've got life, got 1 rage on melee hit, which is quite important, along with our amulet anoint to make us build rage really quickly. Got 30 melee crit chance there, 5 fizz is extra fire here, and another 4 life there. So that pretty well does it for the passive tree. Of course, peruse the path of building at your leisure. And I did throw in a couple of % accuracy tattoos. I'm not sure that I actually need those against blinded enemies and with a level 20 precision, but they don't hurt nonetheless, so if you are missing a little bit of accuracy, tattoos is a good way to fill that in. You can of course fill in some spell suppression as well, although those tattoos are really expensive, and this character already has somewhere on the order of 70 divines into it, and I didn't really feel like that was worth it just to be able to drop the suppression on the Watcher's Eye. So, for gearing, you're going to need something that is quite hard to acquire, and that is a good Fizz Dagger. These are not popular items. Fizz daggers haven't been popular for a really long time, so it can be tough to get your hands on a good one. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the best one in the entire league right now. There's nothing comparable on trade and hasn't been. Maybe somebody else is hanging on to one that they're using as well. But I've got T1 flat here and T2% and hybrid. It had scuffed suffixes when I got it, but I wiped those, and originally I was just using a multi-mod. Eventually, when I had more money, I just locked prefixes and did harvest, remove, add speed. Planned to do that several times until I got T1 or T2, but I got T1 attack speed on the first try. Crafted on the crit plus strength and int and slammed with an exalt. Would have loved to get crit multi there, but ended up getting the second best thing, which was a really high accuracy roll. Originally I had accuracy on my helmet, that let me drop that for spell suppression, which let me drop the spell suppression dagger mastery to get the culling strike mastery instead. I'm using a Peripeteia as mentioned previously. It's an interesting shield, it gives some mana, it gives a lot of attack speed and movement speed, and has a good amount of energy shield and evasion. You can get quite a bit better ones theoretically. Like I said, I would really like to get one with plus max frenzy in addition to the recovery on block. And then if you get one that has a flat energy shield implicit as well, that can get you quite a bit more energy shield because of the really large percentage roll on Peripeteia. Using the dark ray vectors for the frenzy charge and the suppress and life. Rest of the stuff is pretty basic rares. You're going to want to go for flat fizz and elemental damage with attacks everywhere you can get it, since those are our main damage scaling vectors. You want crit multi on the amulet, of course. Gloves are pretty standard. You're going to want a decent intelligence roll somewhere because we're a little bit lacking on intelligence. That lets us level gems higher and use an ambusher in the first place. The rest of it's pretty basic. Get as much life and evasion and energy shield as you can. I crafted this chest. Obviously it could be a lot better, but it's got the 3 mods we needed, which is crits with attack, additional curse, and the frenzy charge on hit. Other things could be way better, but it is what it is. And then just make sure you've got your resists capped. In my case, I ended up deciding to go for a Wise Oak in this build, so I did some harvest shuffling and got all of my resistances balanced so that we're getting the triple pen and the triple damage reduction. There are plenty of other options you could go. You could go Lion's Roar, the knockback is kind of annoying. You could maybe juggle things to try and fit in a Tincture, that would definitely be the strongest offensively. But we have a pretty large mana pool and almost none unreserved, so that would require quite a lot of juggling to be able to fit that in. Other flasks are pretty standard stuff. We've got a silver for Onslaught, and then we've got a jade and a Stibnite, as you do on most evasion builds, and typical catalyzed Eternal Life flask with sealing for a suffix. We do have Intimidate on hit on our gloves. We've got some extra mana reservation efficiency and reduced mana cost of attacks on our helmet. We have Anointed Veteran's Wrath. Back to the passive tree here. That's the node over here that gives 2 rage on melee hit and gives you an extra second before your rage starts decaying. That 2 rage on hit plus the one I've got from the Lethal Pride is 3. That's 6 per second, so it only takes you 5 seconds to get to your max 30 rage for 30% more damage. If you found some other rage generation, perhaps if you found another source of Intimidate so that you didn't need Intimidate here, you could go for rage generation here and then you could anoint something else. But this just felt like a really solid, easy anoint to go for, and that's what I decided to go with. I believe I mentioned Balance of Terror, but if I didn't, you definitely want a Balance of Terror. That is a huge boost for any of these mixed element Fizz to Elemental builds. Cast your LE Weakness and you get a huge damage steroid. Go through the gems I'm using on the build now. Main setup is, of course, Reave of Refraction, and we've got that linked with Inspiration for some crit and cut down the mana cost, Multi-Strike, Wed, Trinity, and Nightblade. I have a separate Vol Reave with 20 quality over here. If I felt like doing more double corrupts, I would try to get a 21-20 Vol Reave of Refraction, but I didn't really have anything important to put in this extra gem slot anyways, so you can just use a separate Vol Reave to get up your stages, and then you can keep them up with the main one you're using. Let's see, where's my reservation? For reservation, I'm using Grace, Hatred, Precision, and Blood and Sand. Obviously toggle to Blood Stance for single target for the extra damage, stay in Sand Stance for big AoE when you're clearing. Down here, I've got Enduring Cry linked with Urgent Orders, Second Wind, and Life Tap. I've got pretty much everything other than my main attack on Life Taps, just so that I don't need much mana unreserved. So that gives us 2 Enduring Cries, which means at the beginning of a boss fight, we can just instantly pump ourselves up to the max 8 Endurance charges, and then thanks to the Charge Duration Mastery, you only have to do 1 every 20 seconds after that. Quite solid there. I'm using a Flame Dash and a War Banner as well. You just pop down the War Banner whenever you feel like you've got enough stages. It's not really a big deal, it doesn't add a ton because most of the time I just kind of forget about the stages anyways, but if you see you've got a lot of stages, you can pop it down for a decent temporary damage boost. And we've got Flame Dash for crossing terrain because Shield Charge gets stuck on everything and cannot cross ledges. Over here, along with the Reave, we've got Shield Charge and linked in with faster attacks, so we can bust out our Vol Reave really fast and we can Shield Charge around really quickly. And then finally we've got Elemental Weakness and Assassin's Mark. I'm using Mark on hit to auto-apply that Assassin's Mark, and again just have it linked to Life Tap so that it doesn't drain our mana. Pretty straightforward stuff. The main things I would say you need to look out for are definitely fitting in the Forbidden Flesh and Flame. That's what gives the build a ton of its tankiness. Try to get a really good dagger, and then a hit that melee hits Fortify enchant. Thankfully that is not a very expensive enchant. It doesn't require power runes or time runes, so it's not too bad, just requires a decent number of mountain runes. Playstyle is pretty simple, just Shield Charge around, keep your Vol Reave stacks up as much as you can. You're really quick, so if they fall off it's not really a big deal, you just hit it again. Vol Reave has 3 charges on it anyways. Most things you can just sit in and face tank as far as hits goes, so you really just want to look out for damage over time effects, because those will get you if you are standing in them and don't expect it. Thank you guys for watching. I will close out the video with some more footage. I'll put in, I don't know, I guess an Uber boss fight and the Feared or something, so you can see what it looks like on bosses. If you found this video interesting, give a thumbs up, give a subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. I know it's pretty informal, but like I said, not really intended to be detailed build guides, more so a showcase of this is what I'm doing, do something similar if you feel like it. Thanks for watching everybody, catch you next time.
Exile, do something!
Give yourself to the void. Joining terrors. Life is so brutal. I feel death's pull. Mortal flesh is so fallible. Give yourself to the void. Black survival. This has been most entertaining. I'll take the prize.